become a bit of a thing in pop culture over recent years, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the method of loci, also known as the mind palace mnemonic memory technique. For those of you unfamiliar with it, it is relatively simple to understand the basics. The user visualizes a place with landmarks or objects that they are able to attach specific memories or ideas to in order to go back, wander through the palace, and call upon the memories. This is its basic form. More advanced techniques include creating a person's own new place to store different types of information. Hence, someone may create a house or a palace and assign different sections to different categories of a thought. Perhaps a library wherein different books store the memories of scholastic knowledge, a living room designed with pictures and knickknacks to remember family and events shared with them, etc. I have constructed one of these, and somehow someone has managed to break into it. I would like to start by explaining my particular construction, and as I get caught up, I shall begin chronicling things as they happen, my efforts to try and find this intruder in my mind and to rid myself of them. I take medication for a couple of issues. Note, I'm not suffering from schizophrenia or any other mental conditions that causes hallucinations, and as a side effect, I encounter often is a bit of memory impairment. It's not generally too bad, but it's bad enough to cause me annoyance, and I've tried many things to help me keep my mind sharp. I do puzzles and such to try to keep up my mental strength. I first came across the Mind Palace technique in Little Big by John Crawley. As I often dream of houses, specific houses that exist only in my dreams, I eventually decided to give it a whirl. I had nothing to lose, and it could be fun. The way it was described in Little Big, not only would I have improvements in my memory, but I could also possibly get a chance to see my subconscious alter things as I learned more about them. Being able to wander through my own head and pick up on things that were going on in my subconscious mind seemed like it would be an added benefit at the time. I started small, and to help myself, I would grab pictures from the internet of designs I felt comfortable with to help me envision my palace. I initially had a foyer with a large, comfortable sofa in front of a fireplace, flanked by bookcases that had a few pictures on the mantel and a painting above it. I would sit on the sofa and embed the thoughts or memories into one of the items in the room. Eventually, I had to branch out, though. Too little space for 40 years worth of memories. Twin staircases swept up behind the sitting area and to the second floor, appeared off to the sides, and a blurred darkness weighted my placement of doors into the wings. On the second floor, I first made a gallery off to the left that I thought of as high school. It was a long portrait gallery that had pictures of the people that I knew from high school, as well as some separate events. The more detail I had of these events, the more elaborate the area of the portrait took. Some became little nooks with extra memorabilia associated with the person set up on small stands. Others opened into their own rooms. An example. My high school guidance counselor, Mr. Donahue. Mr. Donahue favored brown and orange sweaters and sweater vests, and his office was decorated with orange, brown, and yellow. He told terrible jokes and tossed out brain teasers by the dozen. I babysat for his son a couple of times and gifted him with a Nintendo game that we both enjoyed when we discovered that the screen to his television showed parts of the scenery that mine didn't, allowing him to access parts that I couldn't. Mr. Donahue had a nook now, with a small picture of a sailboat, Zeno's paradox with a man crossing a lake on a boat used as an example, a screen door, don't lean on screen doors, you might fall and strain yourself, and a Nintendo cartridge on yellow, brown, and orange stands. After over a year of work, I had a library assigned to individual scholastic subjects, and the books were moved from their shelves in the foyer to their new respective homes, with empty tomes taking their place to be filled later. Various other galleries represented different times in my life or concepts such as music. Due to the rooms that would grow from the portraits, any blueprints would have defied mathematics and fallen strictly in the realm of Escher. But it worked in my head, and that was the important part. The blurry darkness on the ground floor gave way to hallways leading to rooms dedicated to close friends and family. The wings and stories of the palace grew like Stephen King's Rose Red. Seemingly little rhyme or reason behind their specifics, they were just built where they felt they needed to be. I would enter my palace at night before bed, settle into my sofa, and start organizing the new information of the day. Embedding new information into one of the blank books on the shelves will result with it promptly placing itself in the correct library when I was finished. Thoughts on people traveled into their respective rooms or nooks throughout the palace, and newly met people would have their portrait hung in the proper gallery. The organization was easy by this time for the most part. What fascinated me was when I would take the time to walk around from room to room. Spending a particularly long time before a painting would bring up more memories that I had stored away and add to the detail or enhance its status to a nook or a room. Linked ideas could take me from one place to another at the speed of thought. Mr. Lawton's humanities class, where we were first introduced to the Cyrillic alphabet and the difference between translation and transliteration. The back of the Clanbook Malkavian, which had written in Cyrillic transliteration, "If you can read this, you are officially tragically hip." My Armenian friend being so excited when I asked him to give me a transliterated version of the song Gna, remembering him teaching me that Gna meant go, while Ari meant come here. Playing my current MMO, where one of my friends and guildmates had all of her tunes with variations of the name Ari in them. Stopping myself from having such out of control tangents in my thinking was one of the things I was trying to use this for, though it could be a good way to put myself to sleep at times. Another thing I discovered when taking extended walks, particularly after spending a good deal of time on Facebook, was that the portraits would begin to alter slightly. It was like watching Dorian Gray at times. Based on the content they posted, they might not acquire the depth of a Nook, but they would become more ugly or beautiful caricatures of themselves based upon the types of posts they had made. If it was people I was close to, their rooms might start altering as well. A friend that I might have had a friend that I might have had a bottle of alcohol in the room for, remembering a time we had at a party, might end up with a cracked, empty bottle if they were acting out as a bitter alcoholic, and so forth. Forgive me for delving so deeply into my own personal creation. It's important, though, for you to understand how my mind works in order to grasp my current problems. There are only a few more things to go through before I can explain my current trouble. As I began to spend more time nightly in my mind palace to relax and unwind, I started thinking of other possibilities for it. About 8 months ago is when the basement was created. I'm the type of person who tends to bottle things up. I needed a way to vent, a place to punch a pillow, as it were. Within the confines of my own mind, I decided that it was allowable to go a bit further and create a room where I could create a more satisfying punching bag and methods of taking out my frustrations. I made a room where I would materialize faceless constructs to kick around and when the week had me at its wit to kick around when the week had me at its wit's end. Also in the basement, I added a bedroom where I could then go, relax, meditate, and access my palace. The pillow punching room seemed to evolve as I discovered the therapeutic value of it. It didn't advance to the status of a torture chamber, but I will admit that a few choice weapons hung on the walls, and the mannequins, though never crossing the line into developing faces, were quite human in how they handled the punishments dealt with them. Though this was a bit worrisome, I didn't use these weapons, nor did I devolve into spending hours a day attacking things in my mind. It was just there for when I needed it. Indeed, I spent more time in the bedroom than any other room, daydreaming and sifting through my thoughts through the windows I had hanging on the walls that led to the various other rooms of my mind. This would have relaxed me and eventually helped me to sleep. Now that you have suffered through my construction, I will introduce you to what is causing my current dilemma. About 2 weeks ago, I entered my mind's basement for a visit to the pillow punching room. After a particularly brutal session that I'm ashamed to say was set off by a combination of political posts on Facebook, petty trolling in the game that I play, and general irritability, I left to go curl up in my bedroom to relax when I saw a new door. One that I had never put up. There were only 2 doors in the basement, both on the same wall, and this one was in the corner of the hallway. I immediately felt ill at ease with this door, as even though I was aware of my palace being able to evolve on its own, it mainly kept to the same architectural style, which was somewhat Victorian steampunk, as well as being close to the same room or hallway the new object would belong with. This door was in my basement, where I kept only means of meditation and working out my frustrations, not memories. It was also quite an eyesore. Set in the polished oak walls, this door was unfinished, battered wood. It was something that may have been attached to a long ago abandoned cabin. There was no knob, simply a handle, and it hung poorly in the doorframe, gaps in the wood allowing the interior to be viewed from the outside. I approached it cautiously and decided that rather than opening it, I would look through the openings between the boards. When I did so, I was overcome with a feeling of vertigo. The room wasn't up high, nor complexly laid out. It simply did not look or feel like anything else in my mind. I couldn't see it properly, as if looking through the door gave the effect of wearing a drastically wrong prescription of glasses. Frightened and confused, I decided to leave the door after setting up a second wrought iron barred door in front of it and locking it. That evening, I spent in my mind's bedroom meditating on all of the new information I had recently added and cross referencing by letting myself fly around through the tangents, searching for any reasons why this new addition would have been made. I could come up with nothing. Eventually, I left my palace out of frustration and slept somewhat troubled for the night. I dreamt of doors and shadows, the feeling of an unknown watcher following me through strange hallways I'd never visited, and that horrible vertiginous feeling came over me whenever I tried to focus on anything. The next day, I had decided to find out what this new addition represented, as it was causing me more distress than any other change had caused me before. I wanted to approach it as calmly as I could, so I had a long bubble bath, a cup of chamomile tea, and I lay down on my bed with a lavender eye pillow to keep the afternoon light out as I let myself into my mind palace. Settling first in the foyer, I searched again for anything new that may not have been properly categorized away. Nothing was evident. I wandered the second floor galleries and rooms looking for other changes that I may not have noticed for lack of visiting. Again, nothing. Paying very close attention, I scoured the first floor rooms of my family and close friends, once again coming up frustrated and empty handed. The only comfort being that none of the other rooms had been invaded by the same nauseating perspective as the new room provided to me. Finally, I went down to the basement to encounter this new extension of my mind. To my relief, the door I put up in front of it was still locked and nothing appeared to have changed. Opening the door I had created, I rested my hand on the handle and noticed that the wood felt odd. Similar to the view, it seemed to be causing my sense of touch to be invaded by something alien to the way things worked in my mind palace. I'd expected that. It was similar to grabbing a cup and expecting iced tea only to have a mouthful of diet soda, if that's a possible way to describe touch. Trying to explain sensation in one's own mind is difficult. Breathing slowly until I was calm, I braced myself for what other assaults of my senses I may be encountering and slowly pulled the door open towards myself. My visual perception still off and trying to see exactly what was before me, I stood on the threshold trying to acclimate to it as best as I could. It seemed a plain room, concrete floor and walls, perhaps about 20 by 20 feet. There were shelves mounted to the walls with what appeared to be small knickknacks, as well as a few end tables with small items on them, also placed in a seemingly random fashion. As I acclimated to the visual distortion, I took careful, shaky steps towards the first table and found that as I got closer to it, I could see the details better. It was nothing grand, a plant stand about 8 inches across with a half empty Mountain Dew bottle, a CoverGirl compact, and a hair tie sitting upon it. I had no memories attached to these items. I was loath to touch anything in there, as the sensation of the door had been disturbing enough. Venturing to the next table, I discovered a dog-eared copy of The Tropic of Cancer, an open half of a pack of Camel Wides, a black Zippo lighter, and a folded piece of paper that looked to have something drawn within the folded sections I could not see. I checked a few more of the tables, and all had these random items on them that stirred up no memories or attachments to me at all. As I got further into the room, I could make out that there appeared to be a large overstuffed chair there, with some more tables and perhaps boxes around it. I was feeling more and more ill at ease in this room and decided to leave. I made it back out and shut the door behind me. I was again disorientated as I stepped back into the hallway. After regaining my equilibrium, I closed and locked my additional door again and made my way back out of my mind palace to process what I had learned. I did this analyzing outside of the palace so as not to add to the items inadvertently into my own storage. It appeared that whatever was in this room affected my senses of touch and sight. I hadn't noticed any sounds except my own quiet steps and breathing, which appeared to be normal, and there had been no smells nor tastes that I had encountered. Nothing was mine in this room. I could not connect it in any way to myself. Though I was familiar with the book, had smoked Camel Wides at one time, and recognized the other items, they simply existed there, unlike items specifically placed in my palace with a memory or idea implanted in them. I could not come up with any reason that this door and room should have appeared, much less why it was so foreign of an experience to me. After hours theorizing, I could only come up with three explanations. First was that somehow my mind has created this room for some reason I have yet to discover. The second and third are kind of combined. Somehow, either I have encroached upon someone else's memory palace, or that they have done the same to mine. It would explain why I had the altered perceptions if they see things differently than I do, and their nerve endings wouldn't be the same as mine. As whatever significance the objects would hold to them would be set by them, it would explain why I could feel no attachment. But how could it be that our minds have been intersected in this fashion? As I was rather frightened after this experience, I resolved to stay out of my mind palace for a bit. Perhaps it would fix itself and go away, or evolve into something that I could understand if I let my subconscious do its job. More dreams of doors and being watched followed, but they were to be expected. Now to the most pressing concern. Last night, I entered again after giving my mind a week to organize itself. Using the same routines as I had the last time, I went through the foyer, second floor, and the main floor, finding no changes. I then went down to the basement. No changes in my rooms there either, but the door was still there. Hoping something had changed about it, I went to investigate. There was definitely a change, but it wasn't what I had hoped. Peering through the cracks, I could tell that the room seemed the same. The distortion remained as well. The door I had created in front of it was still locked, thank the gods, but small slivers of wood littered the floor at my feet, and the door had chips out of it where it appeared to have been slammed against the bars of my door. I had documented all of the items that I had seen in there the time I had stepped through on a notebook. I did not want to duplicate them to begin appearing in my palace itself. How odd it would be to have a nook based on a room that was built without my input. I did not want to start thinking of the paradoxes that could cause. I decided to enter the room once again to see if it had noticeably changed, if it was still as eerie as it had been, so alien to me. This time, the wood felt the same, but in a way I remembered, still foreign, but a previously encountered sensation that wasn't as bad as the first time. The room made me nauseated with the difference in perceptions. I saw the items I had seen before, and I could smell something now. It smelled of cheap whiskey and burnt cigarettes. I approached the chair and saw a nearby empty bottle on the floor beside an overflowing ashtray. The chair seemed to have indentations where someone had spent a good deal of time sitting in it. Cigarette butts littered the floors. The room stretched further on this time, or I hadn't seen it properly the first time, I'm not sure which. The farther walls had a sheen of heat over a desert highway. The distance could be a mirage of sorts. I was again disturbed and left without touching anything, firmly locking my door over it. The worst part of this was that nothing seemed to fit into any pattern I could discern. If someone else had indeed been trying to enter my mind, as evidenced by the chipped door slamming against my wrought iron protection, how did they get there? Did they know that they were intruding upon my mind space? Or had the door shown up for them as well, out of nowhere? And were they trying to figure it out as well? What would happen if they appeared while I was in here? Or had they been in here when I entered? I was scared. I was angry. Who was my intruder? Why were they disturbing my peace? Why had they shown up in this most private and emotional level of my palace? I entered my pillow punching room in a whirlwind of emotions and went to the weapon wall. I needed to release my frustrations, and faceless victims were perfect for this. I plucked an aluminum bat and rounded into the center of the room, where I began attacking the supplied victim in earnest. Though it had no mouth, it still made noises, whimpers, and grunts of pain, sharp exultations if I hit it in the chest. I was raging over this creation, imagining it to be the invader. I beat it whilst its bones cracked, crushed its kneecaps, had it cowering on the ground below me as I raised the bat to cave in its head, and I had to stop myself in disgust. I had vented out my rage on a mental construct with more violence than I had ever used before. I threw the bat aside, and the room returned to its normal state. Thought of going into my bedroom to ruminate over things felt tainted for me, so I brought myself up for my meditations and decided that a melatonin would probably be a good thing for me to let my subconscious once again process things for itself. Perhaps it would see what I was missing. That was last night. My dreams were again of doors, shadowy figures slipping around corners, an overpowering sense of tobacco and liquor. There were a few faces that flickered by, but none that I could recognize, so quickly they raced across my mind. I found myself unsure of what I should do next. I made notes of the things that I had seen and smelled in the room, as well as its potential change of dimensions. Again, there is nothing in that room that is unfamiliar to me in general, but there is nothing there that I had put into my mind. When I walk through my rooms, objects resonate with tendrils of memory reaching out towards me. And they're also obscure, nothing standing out. If they resonate with anything, it is unease. I believe that I should attempt to touch one of the objects to see if doing so creates any new sense of what they are. I hadn't want to before, as having something touch my thoughts seemed obscene, but this room refused to leave, and it was causing me much distress. I know how I must sound, speaking of this as though it were an actual physical place, fighting with figments of my imagination, fearing for my control over my mind in case something could manage to break into an imaginary palace. It all sounds absurd. But I spent so long in this, perhaps too much time devoted to its construction, and I use it so often to me, it is as real as any other place in the world, perhaps more so in some cases. It is an extension of me. It has some kind of cancer growing in it that I need to rid myself of. The balance changes itself as things in my life change, but always in ways that are understandable, subtle. I must recheck everything again, note any changes that have taken place, and make sure that there are no more secret doors hiding in the back of a hallway or a nook. After I have lunch today, I will prepare myself for a complete inventory again of my mind palace, and then I shall notify you of my results. I've returned. I am more frightened now than I can remember being in my life. I now know who the intruder is, as well as why and how they will make their way into my palace, and I am terrified that it could happen again. I shall explain, but forgive me if my explanation is less than completely coherent. You'll understand my terror before I'm finished. I again began with a cursory check through all the rooms and galleries that I had previously established, and again found nothing amiss. I braced myself and descended into the basement. When I came across the door, the evidence of whoever or whatever was behind it trying to break through was more pronounced. The handle had been broken from the door, and larger chunks of wood were on the floor from its assault upon the wrought iron bars caging it. There were scratches upon the wrought iron as well, as though someone had been clawing at it, trying to force it open from behind the wreck of what was left of the wooden door. I peered through one of the large openings and saw that the room was still in its foreign state, though it looked different than it had the last time I was there. I opened the outer door of the room, and then the wooden one, firm in my resolve to do whatever I must to solve the mystery of this place. Entering the room, it appeared as though its creator had thrown a fit. The shelves had fallen from the walls, the small tables were knocked to the floor with the items they had been displaying strewn about the place. The scent of whiskey and cigarettes was still prominent, while a top note of gasoline rounded off the olfactory assault. I jumped as I heard whimpers and turned to find out who was in the room with me. But there was no one. It appeared as though sound had finally been added as well. Whimpers, a slight scraping, and the creak of wood from above now joined the rest of the cacophony of this siege within my mind. I nearly bolted from the room. Panic began to set in, and I swallowed back the sour taste of bile as I closed my eyes and tried to breathe my way into a more collected state. After a few minutes, I was together as I was going to get. I approached some of the debris on the floor with the intent of picking it up and seeing what would happen. The first thing I found was the book. Fumbling a bit due to the foreignness of the sensation, I knelt on the floor and plucked it from its place. As soon as I made contact with it, a face flashed in my mind. This was Jeremy's book. I remembered him leading discussions about it to anyone who would listen when we were all out together. That had been nearly 20 years ago. It was a hazy part of my past that I always blamed the liquor for losing track of. Jeremy, Andy, Joanna, Leslie, and the rest of that crowd. We were a group at one point, spending most of our time together, drinking coffee or booze and playing at being intellectuals. I couldn't remember why we stopped spending time together. I assumed it was one of those things where people just drift apart. I'd gotten a new job and my schedule changed, life changed. But why was that book in here? Why did it make me remember? I threw it back on the floor, unsure of whether that was an actual memory or if it was just simply my association with the book, enhanced by all of the witchery taking place in this room. I looked for something else. The piece of folded paper laying just there past the book. I picked it up and unfolded it. It was a missing persons flyer. It was of Dana. I'd forgotten about her as well, nearly entirely. I'd never cared for her. She was Jeremy's girlfriend for a time, but we hadn't gotten along. Glancing around, I noticed the hair tie lying a few feet away was the same one she was wearing in the picture. She had never been found. I remembered that she was one of a number of girls who went missing that year. None of them were ever found. That was probably another thing that had been a part of breaking up our little group. No one knew how to act about it. It was beginning to feel as though this was the purpose behind this room. I had no idea who would be trying to force that year into the forefront of my mind, but the possibility that it was the person behind the missing girls was a troubling one. How had they found me? More importantly, why? The only one I had known was Dana, and as I said, we were never close. I put the flyer down and walked over to the chair. A pack of Camel Whites lay on the ground near the lighter thrown from their previous perch. I decided it was now or never. When I picked up the lighter, I got a flash of another face, Stefan. It nearly sent me reeling. Stefan had always been odd. He wasn't so much a part of our group as he was on the periphery. Present, but not really included in our activities unless we were out at a bar. He wasn't generally invited to gatherings at people's homes. I had no idea what had happened to him as we all drifted apart. The lighter was something he used to play with, a nervous habit of his, the tricks he tried to master. I picked up the pack of camels as well. I got a flash of Stefan again. This time, it came with an old house. It was abandoned, decently far out in the woods. I remember him taking me there once when we'd all been a bit drunk. I think it was the only time I'd been alone with him. Want to see something cool? Everyone else was calling it a night, but I was in no hurry to get home, so I'd gone with him. The place was a wreck, but he'd set up one of the rooms with a small gasoline generator and had a radio and a lamp with a couple of chairs and a stash of booze and books. It looked like he spent a decent amount of time here. He tried to come on to me, and I ended up telling him off and leaving. It was a long walk back, and I had to give in and let him drive. It was the last time I spoke to him, I think. I didn't tell anyone else about it, just kept him at arm's length after that. Was it Stefan? Had he figured out a way to insinuate himself into my life again? Why would he do that after all of these years? My mind wandered, and I shook out a cigarette and lit it, force of habit, even my mind, I guess, or wherever I was. The connections I had to these objects was no longer something I doubted, but it was still a foreign feeling. They weren't as deep as those that I had placed in the rooms and nooks and galleries and the higher floors myself. They were uncomfortable, jarring, and fleeting. They didn't fill my mind, rather they teased bits of the past up and left me wondering why they were here. Taking a drag off of the Camel Wide, I was hit with another flash memory. Jeremy sobbing in his backyard over Dana. They hadn't parted on good terms, and he had been wrecked when she went missing. I'd always had a bit of a thing for Jeremy, but it wasn't reciprocated, so I left it alone. This was part of why I disliked her so much, I think. She never deserved him, and then after she left him, she disappeared and he never got closure. Looking at the chair, I realized it was one of the chairs that Stefan had had in that house. It kept coming back to him. Once my mind had made the connection. Leary, that's what I'd nicknamed him to myself. Stefan Lear, always a bit strange. And after that incident in the abandoned house, someone I kept my distance from. I sat in the chair then, and almost without thinking, it was again overwhelmed with flashes of memory. Seeing Jeremy so bereft in his backyard. Remembering the trip to the house with Stefan. The looks that Stefan gave Dana following her breakup with Jeremy. How he hadn't been around as much after the girls started disappearing. Getting a bat, driving out to the forest, and hiding my car after seeing his truck. The long walk, trying not to get lost. Hoping that I was wrong. Hoping that I was right and could save them. No lights on in the house. Hearing something, though, sneaking in the back door. The creaking of the floor, the sound of voices, trying to find them. The pounding of footsteps up the stairs, the struggle, shoving him down the stairs, following him down and seeing the room, seeing the girls, what remained of them. Hitting him with that bat over and over and over until he wasn't making any noise anymore. Where was the screaming coming from? Looking up and seeing that Dana, in her chains, was still alive. Stefan no longer had a face. I was covered in blood and pieces of Stefan. Dana was screaming. Dana was alive. I came to bring her back, but then she'd ruin him again. Dana was cowering beneath me, beaten and starved, and I brought the bat down on her head until she no longer had a face. I took Stefan's keys from his pocket. I cleaned myself as best I could with the pump outside the house. I drove his truck further into the woods and left it. I went home and burned my clothes and donated the bat to Goodwill. I got a new job and got away from my friends. They never found the girls. They never found Stefan. And somehow, I managed to forget it all. I finished the Camel Wide and ground it on the floor with the others. I went to my pillow punching room and took the bat and threw it into the horrible growth and sealed the door over with bricks and then paneling to hide it from my sight. I came out of my meditations so that I could tell you what I found. I am the intruder that broke into my mind. I am the cancer that caused my own distress. I'm the alien presence of the past shoved behind walls that managed to break itself free. And now I am terrified of what else might be lurking in the shadows, just past the edge of thought, building itself into my awareness.